What's going on, guys? Welcome to this week's episode of Ask Mish. So, you guys have been amazing. I've been so annoying on my Instagram stories, asking you guys for questions, asking you guys for like suggestions of topic. Oh, sorry. Oh my gosh. If you're listening to this on audio and not video, you would not know this, but a fly. All right. There's a fly that's been living in my apartment. I can't I live alone. I'm just a girl. I'm just a girl living alone, killing a fly. It's out of my scope of what I personally can do. I know there are girls out there that can do that. I'm not one of them. I know my strengths. So the fly just lives here now. I feel like I should name it. I haven't named it yet. But sorry, that was so distracting. Okay, hello. Hi. All right, guys. Welcome to this week's episode of Ask Mish. So on my Instagram stories, I've been asking you guys for like questions, topics, things. I want to know what you guys want to hear about. You guys have been delivering, and I appreciate that so much. I also, because like, look, this format's kind of new, so I'm like feeling it out, right? So I asked you guys about some topics, right? So I gave you guys a couple topics. Most of you guys want like sex questions answered, which I'm like all here for. What I do want though, and I mentioned this on my stories, I'm going to like touch on it a little bit today, right? But like when I'm like really diving into this stuff, I feel like I will represent Will, the female side, at least hetero female side, right? I need somebody that's going to represent the male side. I feel like it's got to be an actual conversation, right? So for some of these topics, I'm going to find a worthy gentleman and we're going to have him and myself have some like conversations about the topics and the questions that you guys are bringing up, because I want to make sure that we're like kind of giving the full scope here. I don't feel necessarily like, I mean, I'll give you my perspective, but like I want to give you guys the whole perspective. So we have that stuff coming up like you guys wanted. You guys also obviously want like the nutrition weight loss stuff. That's like my sweet spot, obviously. Relationship, confidence, living your best life, all that. So those are the topics that we're going to cover. If you're not already following me on Instagram, my goal in life is to make friends with all of you. So please, like, let's be friends. So if you go on, I live on Instagram. Like, I mean, I'm on TikTok too. I'm on like all the platforms, but like my home is Instagram. Like I live in my stories. That's how I like communicate with the world. That's how I like to talk to people, like through my stories, through my DMs. So I'm going to link my Instagram here in my show notes if you're not following me. Right now, my handle is Mish. It's at obviously Mish MISH of Nutrish Mish. I'll link it in my show notes. Come follow me, say hi, slide into my DMs. Or, obviously love asking me a question. So if there's something that you're like, I want her to address this, like, please do. All right. So we have one question today. It's a good one. It's one I want to spend a little bit of time on. It's a common one that I get. I actually got it twice in one day this day. That's what inspired me to do it, especially this time of year, because it's September. I always joke around like September is sort of like mini New Year. People are sort of like getting their acts together a little bit. A lot of times people are trying to like get, in gear for like some weight loss or health journey or whatever. And I want to make sure that you guys are doing it in a way that's going to be effective. So I think this question, usually we do two questions. This week it's just going to be one, but then at the end, I did something kind of fun. We're doing something that I have called, for lack of a better word, I'm going to come up with a better word, but for now we're calling rapid fire questions, where I had somebody on my team select a bunch of questions that you guys chose. And there's like a lot of sex ones in there. There's business ones, there's confidence ones, there's relationship ones. And I'm just going to like rapid fire answer them. So we're going to get to that at the end. All right. So that being said, guys, let's dive into today's question. All right. So I chose this question because 15-20 minutes prior to getting this question, I had a session with somebody and it was pretty much verbatim the exact same problem. And I have this problem come up all the time. I love doing it in real time. I would actually love if I could record some of my sessions and share them with you guys, because I think actually hearing somebody process it is like so impactful, but I'm going to like do my best to capture it. But every time I do sessions, right, and like God, I've done hundreds of thousands of sessions at this point, sometimes I hit on something and I say it differently than I've ever said it before, and it just resonates differently with that person. And this was one of those times, and she found it super helpful. So I wanted to sort of like kind of capture it here, and I'm hoping it helps anybody that has the same sort of struggle. So this is what she said. Dear Mish, I've been a chronic dieter most of my life, but I'm at the point where I'm so disgusted with my weight. The only time I ever see the scale move is when I'm being super strict, sometimes basically eating nothing, but definitely not eating anything fun. When I do that, I do see results, but that's literally the only thing that works for me. But then I always end up gaining the weight back. I can't be the only one that struggles with this. What do I do? All right, so I'm going to kind of sort of give you like a little bit of the inner workings of what's going on in my brain when I'm having somebody come in like this. Because for somebody who's speaking the way she is speaking, or just like when my client came in, like the level of frustration is so high because they truly believe, right? Because this has just been their experience. or they think it's been their experience at least, that in order for them to see results, like they have to be so strict and so restrictive and sacrifice so much just to see that result for a short period of time, and then inevitably they fail and they feel like that's on them. But she's telling me, and the same thing my client told me, I only see results when I'm super strict. So the first thing I need to do is I need to start to poke holes in that theory, right? So what I said to my client was, I was like, okay, cool. So you see results when you're super strict, right? She's like, yeah, it works. That was the word she used. It works for me when I'm super strict. That's the only time that it works. So I said, okay, so like, then what happened? She's like, well, I was like, give me like a month, right? So week 1, what happened? She's like, well, week 1, I do great. I'm motivated. I usually lose a lot of weight. Cool. What happens week 2? It's harder, but I still probably lose some weight. Okay, great. Then what happens? Well, week 3, usually by week 3, if I even make it to week 3, like I give up and I like slip up a little, like I'll have something. And I'm like, but is it something? She's like, no, usually it's not something. Usually I'm like off the rails. And that's the problem, is a lot of people who struggle with food, a lot of people that struggle with weight tend to have an all or nothing personality type when it comes to food. Meaning like when they're good, they're like too good, like perfectly good, if you want to call it that. But then that being said, they're equally on the other side when they can't do it anymore. And that's just sort of like human nature. Whenever, like I say this all the time, restriction breeds overindulgence. So the root cause for a lot of people like that struggle with this is they have a very restrictive mentality around food, because they believe that the only way that they're ever going to see results is if they are super strict, right? Now, we're going to poke a hole in that in a second. But the problem is that restriction breeds overindulgence. So what happens is if I give 100 and then I take 100, I'm always left with 0, right? And you see this happen in like a bajillion like areas in life. Like, so for example, the example I always like to use is if I have a kid who's like 19, right? And they're like not allowed to drink. They're more likely to drink like anything and everything, like the gross like 99 banana shit, like whatever they can get their hands on, and usually in like crazy large quantities, because like they're not supposed to do it, right? And then like by the time they turn 21, like it's exciting for like a minute, but at the time they're like 21 and a half, it's like whatever, like I don't care anymore because I'm allowed to do it, right? So restriction always breeds overindulgence, vice versa. But then once you're allowed to anymore, like, the novelty wears off. But the problem is, like, for years and years, you have this belief system, like, I can't lose weight unless I cut all this stuff out. That's the only time I've ever really seen results. But then it's not sustainable. And then when you go off like hard in the other direction. So basically what my client described, she's like, yeah, maybe I'll lose like, let's say 2 or 3 pounds week 1, let's say like 1 or 2 pounds week 2, let's just call it like 4 pounds total. Then I gain back, 2 or 3 pounds the third week, and then I gain another pound back the fourth week. So you're left with 0. So at the end of the month, you're left with 0. So you're telling me that, this works, but we're playing it out and you're left with no actual weight loss. So the first thing that I said to her is, I need you to start to change your definition of worked. Worked means it worked, not temporarily. It means it worked. If I lose something, I can't find it anymore. When I lost my license, I've never saw that thing again. God knows where it is. When I lose my keys, I don't find it anymore. But when I misplace something, I find it again. So it's like, this doesn't work for you as far as losing weight goes. This works for you as far as misplacing weight goes. You have misplaced weight this way, but you have found it again. So you have not lost it. So let's change your definition of worked from did it stay off? If it did not stay off, then this methodology does not work for you. And she was like, okay, interesting. Haven't thought about it like that before. All right. And then she's like, but I see people online do it. Like, why can't I do it if I see people online do it? And I was like, well, what does that mean? And she's like, well, I have this friend and I have that friend who like sells this thing. And like everyone's always posting things. I was like, look, there are 2 types of people. There are some people, most of the people that you're seeing online, that only post like everyone posts the highlight reel online. And the same applies for their weight loss journey. Like nobody's like, gain back 10 of the 15 pounds that I lost. Awesome day. Or like no one's going to post that, right? Everyone just posts like the good stuff. So yeah, when people are on the upswing, like you've been on an upswing, like everyone's been on an upswing in their weight loss journey. Like, yeah, everyone posts that shit. Nobody posts when they're like not doing well until they're starting to do well again. And then it's like the before and after, right? So like I personally don't love before and afters for that reason, because it doesn't tell the whole story. But most people are that. And I was like, and then you have like the other type of person. Now, I was only able to articulate this very recently. I've been saying the same things for so long because I have the same situations come up, but every once in a while I like say things differently. This was one of the things that I was recently able to articulate differently. People can struggle with food for like 3 reasons, right? One is a lack of knowledge. Like they just don't know the right way to eat for them at this time, for example. for example, some people just really don't know how to eat well. Some people don't know how to eat well for themselves in this time frame. So for example, when you're in your 30s as a woman, you should be eating probably differently than if you're in menopause, if you're trying to see weight loss. It's just like it's a lack of knowledge, right? So that's the first reason. The second reason is you have the knowledge, but you just don't have a good system of execution. Like you're not great at grocery shopping, maybe you don't love cooking, like whatever. Like you know what to do, but like you can't do it because you don't have a good execution system. The third reason, and this is the reason that, these people are struggling and a lot of people are struggling, and the people that I personally work with, are struggling, is their mindset. They know what they should be doing. They know how to do it, but because of their relationship with food, because of their mindset around food, they're unable to do so consistently. Now, I've been saying that for years, right? But I've recently made a distinction between two groups of people. There's one group of people who are people. Now, all right, I'm going to preface this before I say it with, from a scientific point of view, the brain wants to move towards things that make it feel good and away from things that make it feel bad. So there's a group of people that struggle with the mindset and they manifest differently. Same problem, just manifested slightly differently. The first group, the pain of the scale is scarier and greater to them than the pain of giving up whatever that food is. So those people tend to be like sort of like more like the neurotic dieter types. Like they're a little bit less likely to actually be overweight, even though they might perceive themselves to be overweight, but like they're very like neurotic and anxious around food. The second type of person has a very similar struggle, but to them, the pain of losing control over food is greater than the pain on the scale. And usually the root cause of this, not always, but usually it's your parents, and it just kind of depends what kind of mom you had, to say it kind of bluntly. So if you had, again, I'm generalizing, but if you had like controlling parents, you're more likely to be the type that the fear or the pain or the fear or whatever you want to call it of losing control over food is greater than the scale. If you had like parent, and again, generalizing here, that was more like weight conscious and aesthetic conscious, you're more likely to be the first type. So I've recently made that distinction. So my client, as well as myself, are more like the second type. Like I had mindset stuff around food. Like the only reason I'm good at any of this shit is because I had to like go through it myself, which that could maybe be a whole other episode. But for me and for her and for I'm pretty sure this person, just based on how they wrote it, the pain of losing control over food is greater sometimes, or could be greater than the scale, right? So that's the choice that you're going to make over and over again. So again, understanding that distinction and understanding why your brain does what it does, it's important to know. So she says, like, I have to restrict, right? So I was like, all right, if you have to restrict, but we keep playing it out, right? She's like, but I have to do it. And she kept like insisting. She's like, I have to do it, I have to do it. And I was like, all right, look, you've done this before, correct? It always happens where Jack dies. We know like Jack's gonna die at the end of Titanic. Like we know how the story ends because like you've done it before, right? And she was like, okay, but like I'm just so frustrated with myself. Like if I am not strict, it's just not gonna happen fast enough for me. And I was like, but the problem is that whenever you try to just chase that number, right? Whenever you try to be super strict, it's not something that's sustainable. So then you backtrack. I was like, true or false? Do you believe that if I have a guy, this is my famous analogy, do you believe if I have a guy that comes in here eating 15 cheeseburgers a week and now he's eating 10, do you believe that that person will see results on the scale? And she said, yes, because it's better than their bodies used to. So I said, okay, do you believe that that applies to you? And she was like, I believe that that applies to me, but it's going to happen too slowly. And I was like, it might happen at a slower pace, but it'll happen at a consistent pace because you just played out for me that in a month, let's just use 1 pound just to make the math easy in my head at this point. Let's say the first week you lose a pound, the second week you lose a pound, but then the third week you gain a pound, and then the fourth week you gain a pound. You give 100, take 100, you're always left with 0. At least this way, you lose 1, 2, 3, 4 pounds every single week, right? So she's like, all right, that sort of makes sense. But she's like, but how do I know? Like, how do I know it's going to work? And I said to her, I was like, well, have you ever tried it this way before? Have you ever tried this? And she's like, no, I haven't tried this before. She's like, all I know is all or nothing. That's all that's ever worked for me. And I corrected her again. I was like, I want you to change your definition of worked. Worked means it stayed off. This did not work for you. You did not lose weight doing this. You manipulated your weight doing this. I was like, so you're telling me that you believe that if you improve, right, just like my cheeseburger guy, you'll see some result. Maybe it's not like the biggest result in the world, but you'll see a result. And if you keep doing that consistently, you will eventually get there. But if you don't, you won't. And she was like, yeah. She's like, I do. She's like, but she said, I take Peloton classes a lot. And she's like, in Peloton, they say you have to choose your hard. And I need this so badly right now. I just need to choose my hard and I just need to buckle it up. And this time it will be different. And I was like, girl, cool. But like, if we watch Titanic again, Jack's going to die at the end. Like, we know how all this stuff ends. We watch the movie, we watch the book, we know the story, whatever. If you need to do it again, we can watch it again. But like, we pretty much know what's going to happen. I was like, tell me again what you just said about the Peloton thing. She's like, well, when I take these Peloton classes, they say you have to choose your hard. And I'm like, well, what does that make you feel? She's like, it makes me feel like I have to like go harder than everybody else in the class. It makes me feel like I have to like turn up the intensity. I have to go harder. And if I'm not going as hard as I possibly could, I'm not doing it right. So I was like, well, that's kind of interesting. I was like, because being restrictive doesn't seem hard for you. In fact, you're A, insisting on doing it, and B, you've said that you've been able to do it, for short periods of time, but you're able to do it. I was like, hard for you is not more intense. Hard for you in this case scenario, it's being in the middle lane. It's having that moderation. It's being the guy who's going from 15 cheeseburgers to 10 cheeseburgers. That's harder for you. It's easier for you to go from 15 cheeseburgers to 0 cheeseburgers. I was like, choosing your hard does not mean increasing the intensity. Choosing your hard means doing what you're not comfortable with. It means doing it differently. It means doing it that way that like maybe you haven't done it before. You've done it this way before. And you can do it this way before. You've told me that you can, but you told me you haven't tried it in a way where it wasn't so intense. It wasn't so extreme. It was better. That's your hard. And she was like mind blown by this. She's like, that makes sense to me. She's like, I've always perceived hard as being intense. And I said her good mindset shift is, instead of perceiving hard as increasing the intensity, hard is doing the thing that you're least comfortable with. Hard is consistency, right? For some of my clients that I work with, hard doesn't mean like they'll get to a certain point in their weight and they'll be like, oh my God, to get to the next level, does that mean I have to like eat less? No, to get to the next level, you have to like start speaking nicer to yourself. As cheesy as that sounds, because like actually that's a thing. To get to that next level, you have to like eat breakfast. To get to that next level, you have to drink more water. Like sometimes it's addition and not subtraction. It doesn't mean more intense. It doesn't mean you have to suffer for your art. It doesn't always mean all of those things. Sometimes it just means doing the thing that you're not comfortable with, or doing the thing that is unfamiliar. And that really resonated for her. And I hope if anybody's listening, it resonates for you as well. So I think a couple of good takeaways from this whole thing is, number one, when you're looking at how you're doing something, I want you to define worked by the permanent end result that you're seeking. Not like, did I see it for a little bit and then I didn't? Because like, look, if I'm somebody, like if it worked forever. Like if it took away the problem, it took away the problem. If the weight came back, it didn't work, right? When you lose something, you don't find it again. That's number one. Number two is you want to work with the psychology of your brain. Your brain wants to do two things. It wants to move towards things that make it feel good and away from things that make it feel bad. So if you're constantly making yourself feel like you can't have stuff and you have to miss out on things and you're making yourself feel guilty, like your brain's going to want to completely check out of that. Right? So you have to do things in a way that feel good. The other thing your brain doesn't like, it doesn't like to be told it can't have things, because the second you feel like you can't have something as a human being, it's all you're going to want, right? So you want to work with the psychology of your brain. And I think the big takeaway, and the takeaway that she really took away from this, is that harder doesn't mean more intense. It doesn't mean more suffering. Harder means sometimes what you're not comfortable with, what you're not familiar with, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you're not actually going to like it. It might actually feel better to you. So you can lose weight in a million different ways, right? That way I find extremely ineffective. That way actually is proven to be extremely ineffective. And you have to find a way that feels good for you, right? Our philosophy at Nutrition Mish is, if you want to lose weight in a way that you're going to keep it off, it has to feel good. It has to be something you could do for the rest of your life. 2, you have to like it. And then 3, it has to obviously be an improvement from the way you're already eating. If any of those things are missing, it's not going to work long term. And for her, at least 2 out of the 3 were missing right there. And that's why she wasn't having success long term. And that's why you're not having success long term. So work on finding the middle lane. The all or nothing personality type historically always struggles with food. Learning to find the middle lane is uncomfortable sometimes, but you're going to like it more, and your brain's going to like it more, and then you're going to want to do it more. And then you're going to see consistency, right? I much rather see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 than I lose 5 pounds, then I gain back 4, and then I lose 3, but then I gain back this. Like, look at the patterns, look at the numbers, look at the history, and worst comes to worst, humor me. Just try it for a little bit. If it hasn't worked your way, try it my way for a little bit. I've done it, I don't know, a couple 100,000 times at this point. So humor me and try it for a little bit. But it's a mindset shift, because the problem is when you've been doing this way for so long, it feels real. It feels like the only thing. And then you look online and you see your friends doing it, because you're not seeing the whole picture. You're just seeing the one side of it. The other side, everybody struggles with. So you want to start to approach it from a different way and start to change your belief system around what is going to work for you and what's going to work for you long term and what a real solution is. So I hope that was helpful. So there were a bunch of questions that you guys sent me that could be what I will eventually come up with a more creative name for, but for now we're just going to call it exactly what it is, rapid fire questions, where I will, as you might have guessed, answer the questions rapidly. So I have a couple here that you guys sent in, and let's see how we do here. Okay. Number one, how do you know if a situationship is going to be more? If you're confused, it's probably not going to be more. So if like he's in and he's out and he's like, seems like he's into you, but then he's not, and then you're sending the text to your friend being like, well, what does this mean? If you're confused, it's probably not. If you're not confused, then it probably is. If you're asking this question, it's probably not. It's fine. Don't invest more time into it. That's my answer. What is something I can do when I'm not really feeling my leanest, but I have to go out? Tan? I don't know. I'm saying this if you guys are watching me. I'm literally the color of a piece of paper. I don't know what happened to me this summer. I feel like I spent time outside, but I'm still the color of a piece of paper. I always feel better if I like get a little spray tan, little color. That's just me. I don't have that right now, but that's what I would suggest if you're not feeling like 100%. I saw this on Instagram. It said like, if you can't tone it, tan it. And I was like, yes, I agree with that. I am a straight girl, then why do I like watching lesbian porn? Because girls are just universally hot. Like girls are just universally beautiful. Like guys are sort of like guys are hot too, obviously, but like it's like an acquired taste. And also like there's like a functionality there. Like girls are just beautiful. Like the female body is just beautiful. I think anybody can appreciate that. And I think the male body is more of an acquired taste. I think that's normal. Is it normal? I think it's normal. What is the hardest thing about owning a business? Well, these questions are all over the place, guys. Hardest thing about owning a business, I would say, okay, I'd say my answer probably would change at different points. I would say with all the 12 plus years of experience I have now, the hardest thing about owning a business is understanding when your role changes and then being able to grow into that role and change what the company is at that level. So like, for example, when I first started, it was just me. Like I was the talent. That was it. That was not that hard. Then I had to like hire somebody to like do exactly what I do and exactly the same way. And then like I also became like a boss. And then like that team like grows. And then you have to sort of become like the marketer and then like the manager and then that grows and then you need a marketer and a manager and then like the CEO. So like I think just like recognizing, which I didn't for I think a really long time, recognizing like when the company is growing and then what your role needs to be and then how to grow into that role and like keep the house of cards from falling, if that makes sense. That for me is the hardest thing, if that made sense to anybody out there. Is it bad to fantasize about somebody else when you're with them? Ooh, depends why. If you're doing it because you're not into the person that you're with, then yeah, that could be a problem. If it's because you're just like kind of like having fun or like you just like need some like good mind candy to like think about, which women need mind candy, then no, I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I think the answer to that is very, very heavily based in intention. How do you feel about sexting? I love it. I think sexting is great, again, for mind candy. Women usually need mind candy to like kind of like get into it, but like you can't be awkward about it. Like you have to be somebody that's like comfortable and cool with it, and like you have to be with a partner that's comfortable and cool with it. Otherwise, obviously, like it can get awkward. That could be like a whole actually real episode, is like maybe like how to like sex, like where that fits in. But like no, love it. All right, last one here. Is it okay to fake an orgasm? No, it's not. We've all done it, don't get me wrong, but like no, that's actually that's going to be an episode. I want to do that episode, and I want to do that with like a conversation with a guy like that. I'm actually excited for that one. So the answer, short answer, rapid fire answer, no. It's if you've done it, whatever, we've all done it, right? But like no, and that's gonna be a whole episode, so stay tuned for that. All right, guys, hope you got as great of a time as I did. If you guys have any questions that you would like answered, please slide into my DMs on Instagram at Mish Mish, links in the show notes. And make sure you're following me on Instagram too. Like I said, I want to make friends with everybody that listens. I want to like know all of you guys. So come hang out with me on Instagram. Let me know your questions, and I will see you guys next Thursday.